Good morning and welcome to the Morning Report. My name is William Lawson, and this is a subject that I thought was fascinating that I thought I'd share here. Way back in 1969, when I was 9 years old, a children's television show changed the landscape of American culture forever. It wasn't a cartoon, wasn't sugar coated. It was a program designed to teach, a program designed to inspire, and to open doors for children, especially those left out of opportunity. The show was Sesame Street. Within months of his debut, Sesame Street had kids singing their ABCs, counting with puppets, and laughing with a giant yellow bird. It looked like America's future, diverse, hopeful, and real. But not everybody saw it that way. In 1970, Mississippi made national headlines. In 1970, I was 10. National headlines barring Sesame Street, not because of the violence, not because of language, not because of context too mature for children. Mm-mm. The state banned it because Black children and white children were shown playing together on screen. There were also Hispanic children there, but they didn't mention that. And then later on, there were Asian children too, but that was later. Yes, so in Mississippi, the sight of children learning side by side, black and white, was considered too dangerous for public television. Now, this is the story of that ban, why it happened, who pushed forward, how people fought back, and what it tells us about the power of media, the fear of integration at the time, and the resilience of ordinary citizens. Okay, Sesame Street premiered on November 10th, 1969. It was produced by and it was produced then and now by the Children's Television Workshop and funded by a mix of public and private money, including the newly created Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the Carnegie Corporation, and the Ford Foundation. The show was a direct response to a real problem. Millions of children were arriving at kindergarten already far behind, especially in poor urban and minority communities. Kids lacked access to preschool, early reading materials, or structured educational play, and or the parents who would teach these things to their children. Joanne Gans Cooney, the executive behind the idea, believed television, already a fixture in American homes, could be harnessed to close the gap. So why not turn the most powerful communication tool in the country into an educational force? Okay, so in order to do this, the creators used research, psychologists, educators, child development experts. They built a show with catchy songs, fast moving sketches, colorful characters. They tested segments with children to make sure that the lesson stuck. Okay. And they made a critical decision. The show would be set on a city block that looked like neighborhoods millions of kids actually lived in. It kind of looked like New York or DC because there were brownstones there. Now, it was not where I was living at the time when I was, 8 years old. Not doesn't look anything like my neighborhood. So it was not suburbia. It was not a cartoon fantasy. There were stoops, sidewalks, streets with graffiti. It was Gordon and Susan, black parents, black couple. Gordon and Susan weren't parents; they didn't have any children. They were teaching and nurturing. There was Bob. Bob was the music teacher, taught piano, taught guitar, and there was Luis and Maria later, Hispanic shopkeepers, and of course there was Mr. Hooper. Mr. Hooper was a white store owner. Big Bird always called him Mr. Looper. was great. The cast was intentionally integrated because children needed to see adults and children of all races interacting as equals. This, at the time, this was 1970, was revolutionary. And it worked. Within months, kids across the country were singing Rubber Ducky, You're the One. Actually, that was later too, but and learning how to count. Early studies showed that regular viewers of Sesame Street were better prepared for school than kids that didn't watch. But in Mississippi, this success was a problem. Now, it came out in 1970. Or 69, I was 9. I wasn't, I was well beyond kindergarten, but I loved the show. I loved it, and I still do, frankly. Okay. Now, to understand the band, you have to understand the state of Mississippi at the time. And this is where attaching today's values and smearing them on top of the past doesn't always work. The 1960s had been a decade of upheaval in the South. Mississippi, more than any other state, resisted civil rights. It was the epicenter of voter suppression, violence against activists, and open defiance of federal law. The Voting Rights Act that passed in 1965, breaking down some of the most blatant barriers to Black political participation. But in practice, Mississippi remained deeply segregated. Schools were only the beginning to integrate under federal court orders. White flight was accelerating. The Ku Klux Klan was still active. Politically, Mississippi was dominated by Democrats, but not the progressive kind you might think about today. It was the old guard, solid South Democratic Party, whose leaders had opposed civil rights at every turn. Governor John Bell Williams, elected in 1967, had literally resigned from Congress after the National Democratic Party supported Lyndon Johnson's Civil Rights Act. He was a segregationist Democrat through and through. The state's educational television commission, the body that controlled what aired on Mississippi Public Television, was appointed under this system. They reflected the prevailing political establishment cautiousness about integration and hostile at worst. They were cautious about this, but they were really hostile about it. So when Sesame Street aired in Mississippi, its integrated cast of adults and children immediately set off alarms. In May of 1970, just 6 months after the show's premiere, the Mississippi Educational Television Commission voted 3-2 to remove Sesame Street from the state's public television lineup. Their stated reason? The show's highly integrated cast was not suitable for Mississippi audiences. Wow. And just think about that for a second. In their eyes, the danger wasn't the Muppets. It wasn't the lessons. It wasn't anything except the fact that Black and white people were shown together, teaching, laughing, learning. One commission member admitted outright that the show's integrated cast was the problem. Others tried to frame it as a Mississippi not quite being ready. But what they really meant was this. They feared what might happen if children grew up seeing integration as normal, natural, and good. This was a real threat. Now, folks, it may be time for a coffee break. And if you're going to take a coffee break, 7 Weeks Coffee is a coffee you ought to break with. Because 7 Weeks Coffee isn't just coffee for coffee's sake. It's coffee with a purpose. It's coffee for a reason. 10% of every bag purchase of 7 Weeks Coffee goes to a pregnancy center to help pregnant women in crisis and help them keep their babies. It actually saves lives. It's crazy. You can drink coffee, enjoy delicious coffee, and save lives. So do this. Go to www.7weekscoffee.com. www.7weekscoffee.com and get a bag or two or three or four or five of coffee today. 7 Weeks Coffee, independent, pro-life coffee, supporting a cause that you believe in. Now, the reaction of all of this was really quick, and it was boisterous. Parents wrote letters, teachers protested, ministers spoke out. The story hit newspapers nationwide. The New York Times headline read, Mississippi bans Sesame Street. Editorials ridiculed the state for banning puppets. One Mississippi newspaper called it a black eye for the state. Another warned that denying children educational programming for political reasons was shameful. Letters poured into the Educational Television Commission office. Parents asked why their children should be denied access to the same programs kids across the country were enjoying. Some accused the commission of embarrassing Mississippi nationally. And the backlash wasn't limited to liberals or outsiders. Many ordinary Mississippians wanted Sesame Street back. They knew their kids loved it. They saw the educational value. They resented politicians standing in their way. And eventually, the heat grew too strong to ignore. And because the heat grew too hot to ignore, it just took 3 weeks. 3 weeks. So on June 7th, 1970, Sesame Street returned to Mississippi Public Television. The reversal was quick, but unfortunately, the damage was done. Mississippi had made itself into a punchline. The ban had highlighted the state's resistance to progress, and the controversy cemented Sesame Street's reputation as more than just entertainment. It was cultural change on television. Big Bird had beaten segregation. Now, why would a children's show provoke such fear? Because at the time, because you have to go back to the time. At the time, Sesame Street sort of challenged the social order in a lot of places. Children imitate what they see. And if they saw Black adults in positions of authority, teaching and caring, it undermined a lot of the stereotypes. If they saw Hispanic characters running shops, it explained the idea of community, expanded the idea of community. If they saw white and Black children playing together, it set a precedent that no school board or politician could easily erase. Segregationists understood this, and that's why they fought so hard to control what kids saw and what kids learned. In Mississippi, they had already resisted school integration, often with violence, kind of like they did in Boston. They had fought to keep public spaces divided, and now here came a TV show beamed straight into people's living room, undoing all of that. Well, so in their minds, Sesame Street was dangerous, not because of the Muppets, because of ideas. All right, fall is here, and people are decorating for fall. They are here at my house for sure, and that may mean new flowers, right? Fall color flowers. And in this area here in Central Florida, the best place to get fall colored flowers and decorations is with my friend Christine Vasconcello at Blooming Days Flower Shop. Blooming Days Flower Shop is the premier place for anything floral, whether you need florals for memorial services or weddings or special occasions or quinceañeras, whatever it is, whatever it is. Christine and the folks at Blooming Days Flower Shop are ready for you. So go online right now, www.bloomingdays flower shop. It's bloomingdays.com, bloomingdays.com, not bloomingdales.com. That's a department store. It's bloomingdays.com. Like a lot of times, the ban ironically gave Sesame Street even more power. The story made headlines across the country, drawing attention to the show's integrated cast. Educators and parents outside the South rallied around it. Foundations increased the funding. The Children's Television Network workshop doubled down on this mission. What a few people in Mississippi had tried to suppress, ended up shining brighter. So over the next decade, Sesame Street became a global phenomenon. Translations, international versions, and spin-offs across the continents. So by the 1980s, Sesame Street was watched by children in more than 80 countries. And that's part of the legacy of the band. It proved just how important representation on screen was at the time. Now, there were other shows that were representing Black people and Hispanic people and people living and working and loving together as well during that time. Again, this was not just one single solitary point in time in a vacuum. This was a time continuum. Anyway, so after the band ended, Sesame Street became a staple in Mississippi households, just like everywhere else. Children who grew up in the 70s and 80s remember it fondly. Many of those kids are grandparents now, old enough, no grandchildren, and they tell stories of growing up with Big Bird and Gordon and Susan and Bob and Maria and Snuffleupagus and Mr. Hooper. Yeah, good stuff. Oh, and Oscar and Grover, and of course our friend Kermit. Right, the band faded into historical footnotes, but it still hangs there as a symbol. Even the most innocent educational efforts weren't immune to politics. And as a reminder of how far some people were willing to go to keep children from seeing equality and equity in action. The Mississippi Sesame Street Band is more than a quirky headline. It's a lesson. It teaches us that culture is powerful. What children see, they absorb. What they absorb, they carry into adulthood. And what's always terrified those who cling to outdated hierarchies. It also teaches us that public pressure matters. Citizens spoke up, and within weeks, the ban was gone. Even entrenched power can yield when ordinary people raise their voices. Finally, it reminds us the fight over culture never ends. Whether it's a television show in the 70s or social media today, okay? The struggle over what children see, what they learn, and what values are transmitted continues.